Thank you. Cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Hyun Shin in the Oregon National Lab, and here I'm going to talk about the structural and optical properties of the German selenide monochalcogenide from the quantum molecular simulations, which was published on 2021. So here's the quick outlines. I'm going to talk about the introductions, why these 2D monochalcogenide is important to studies, and show the previous first principle study for those structures, and show the why QMC is needed to study those structures. And I also shows about this DFT and the QMC studies for the bulk and the monolayer structures of the German selenide systems, including equation of state calculations and excited state calculations. Those examples of those German selenide workflows you can find on the reports. I just picked those workflows to run in the virtual machine, so it's not fitted onto the science productions, but you can understand how this workflows is going on. So here's the key introductions. 2D monochalcogenide has been attracted with a great deal of attention. It can be treated to replace the graphene that is difficult to create semiconductors with the opening gaps. It is usually possess the orthorhombic structures, and it's known to possess various polytypes. So the various electronic structures, depending on the structures of polytypes, is expected. So it is known to possess a strong van der Waals interaction. So it needs predict the strong layer-dependent electronic and optical properties. And also, it is been attracted with the tunable electron properties with the strain or the electron field, and it is expected to can have the various applications, including photodetectors and gas sensors. So those structures has been studied with the many ways. What the DFT studies is a well-known approach to study both the 2D monochalcogenide structures. This figure shows the previous DFT studies for the equilibrium lattice parameter on the band gaps of the bulk germanium selenide with the various exchange correlation functional with the DFT functionals. So as we see in these two figures, DFT results are very scattered and no exchange correlation functionals satisfying the arcade structures and optical properties at the same time. So here is the motivations why QMC is needed for the germanium selenide structures. Those monochalcogenide, including germanium selenide, is a bit difficult to study with the DFT studies because the accurate descriptions of the van der Waals sections is required for the because of the strong layer dependencies of the electronic and optical properties on the van der Waals system. And those electronic and optical properties are very sensitive with the geometries. It's fine if we know the experimental values of the geometries for the given the structures, but the accurate geometry estimation is highly required if their experimental result for the geometries is not known, such as some pure polytypes of the monochalcogenide or its monolayer structures. And as we see above, the DFT electronic and optical properties and optimized geometries are very scattered depending on the exchange correlation functional, and so it's hard to conform the optical and electronic properties with the DFT. So this leads to the conclude the QMC's quantum molecular approach is needed to obtain the accurate and optical properties for the germanium selenide structures. So we have the motivations for the QMC. So now we are just study the bulk germanium selenide first to confirm if it is a QMC approach is good to describe accurate structural properties, electron properties for the germanium selenide structures. So let us start with the bulk system first because its geometry and electronic properties are very well known. So its bulk structure is known as some high thermodynamic stabilities and the potential applications in the random access memories. And this bulk system is known as the indirect gap semiconductors, but there is also some claim the possible indirect gap semiconductor is the germanium selenide. is telling that the difference between direct and indirect gap is very small, and its optical property is a bit depending on the way of the measurement in the experimental approaches. So let us do some QMC calculations for bulk system to confirm its electronic and optical properties, and shows how much the QMC approach is accurate for for describing this bulk system. We use the experimental result of the germanium selenide with this lattice parameters. We need to generate the single particle orbitals to use the tri-wave function in the QMC. We perform the PBE with the infinitely high, infinitely large kinetic energy cutoff for the sequential calculation with the large enough K-point grid to fully converge. So using this single particle orbitals, we perform the DMC calculations. We just perform the point 0.005 times that, which is fully converged. And to minimize the final size effect, we just apply the twist average boundary conditions, and also we computed this ground state properties. We define the size of supercells and extrapolate to the bulk limit to minimize the two-body final size effect. I think that you guys are familiar with this twist averaging and extrapolations in the previous the solid state sessions. So here is the quick workflow to get the equation of state for the bulk germanium selenide. I just showed some workflow for the nexus, and here is the lattice vectors for the germanium selenide bulk systems, and we need to calculate this we need to do the DMC approaches with the different lattice parameters to obtain the equation of state. So here is we just put the 5 different lattice parameters for the bulk systems, and here is the atomic coordinate, and we use the plane wave sample coefficient calculation first with a pretty large K-point grid, and do those sample calculations to obtain the single particle orbitals at the desired number of twists and the size of the cells. Then we convert this to use the tidal wave functions for the QMC calculations. So using this tidal wave function in the QMC sections, we need to optimize the GeSe one body and two body factor first, and then we can optimize the GeSe three body factors in order to incorporate the electron ion correlations in our calculations. So using this optimize the GeSe 1, 2, 3 body factors, and we can perform the DMC calculations on there, as you see in here. But we need to make sure. So we need to make sure we just need to deal with the final size analysis to minimize the final size well-known final size effect in the QMC algorithms. We need to do first to minimize the one body final size effect. We need to twist averaging the enough large number of twists, and also we need to increase the size of the cells to obtain the total energies at the different size of cells. Usually, the required total number of twists is decreased when increasing size of the supercells, but you need to make sure it's fully converged. As you see in the left figures, we can obtain the DMC energies and the different size of cell. Here is N is the total number of atoms in the supercell. So we can extrapolate them to the bulk limit to obtain the DMC's energies at the thermodynamic limit. So we did this procedure, this progress in the better different size, different lattice parameters, and here is the equation of state shows the DMC total energies as function of the volumes in the cells. And this table is the summarized result for the obtain the equilibrium lattice parameters and the bulk modulus and the coefficient energies for the bulk systems from the DFT and the DMC. As you can be seen in these tables, we see the estimated lattice parameters and bulk modulus are in excellent agreement with the experimental value. From this result, we can expect that the QMC can discover accurate ground state properties for the bulk germanium selenide system. Also, so there is no experimental result for the coercive energies for the experimental values, but we can expect this calculate estimated coercive energy will be the good guidelines to the expect for the coercive energies, experimental value or coercive energies for the bulk junction solenoid in the future. Now we just studies about the ground state properties. As we know, the QMC is the very suitable to describe the ground state, occurred ground state properties for the many systems. But also the QMC can provide useful information for the excited state properties, such as the band gaps. Now we just estimate the band gaps for the bulk germanium cyanide, and I'll tell you how we did. So there's a many two ways to calculate the band gaps for the many system. One is the optical gaps, one is the fundamental gaps. The optical gaps or the excitonic gap is the lowest photon energies that the neutral and electron systems can observe to promote from the ground state E0 to the excited state E1. So those energy of photon is observed is simultaneously promote electrons to the excited state to the conduction band and leaves a hole in the balance band. Since it is known as the bound electron hole pair, so all the Coulomb attraction between pairs are included in this optical gap calculation. Another one is the fundamental gap, and which is the energies to create free electrons on the conduction band and the free holes in the valence band. So there's mainly two processes to get some of the fundamental gaps. One is the adding electrons on the conduction band and the removing electrons on the valence band. And these two processes can be defined as the ionization potential and the electron affinities for the given system. So its progress is a bit equivalent to the pulling the electron hole pairs infinitely apart. So there's no the Coulomb bindings on the Cauchy particle gap, so it is called as the unbound electron hole pair. So now I just tell you how we can calculate this optical gaps and the Cauchy particle gaps using the QMC. So to calculate the excitonic gaps, we need to calculate the energy difference between the ground state energies and energy from some energies for the promoting the electrons from the valence band to the conduction band. Let us suppose we just need to calculate the direct gaps as a gamma point, as we shown the band structures for the bulk systems. So we will start to the one by one, basic one by one cells, and we just suppose to calculate from there. So we need to calculate the direct gap at the gamma point. We need to get some single particle orbitals at the gamma point with the one by one in the non-stable coefficient calculations. With these wave functions, if we suppose to the quick QMC calculation on there, we will be able to get the Einstein files that include the eigenstate informations from the derivative calculations. This is examples we obtain the one by one supercells with the gamma point. Here we can see that this eigenstate information and the K point information, and it's a band index. So one by one cell includes the total 40 electrons, and which means that there's each 20 electrons and the upspin and the downspin eigenstate. So there's a total 24 band and the eigenstate. So there's 20 electrons. We can expect that up to the 19 band numbers, there are some occupied state, and over the 19 it means that the unoccupied state. So to calculate the optical gaps, so we need to promote the electrons at the band number 19 to the band number 20. So we need to modify the single particle orbital informations in the QMCPACK inputs as shown in these examples. there's a there's mainly two ways to define the electron, the number of the band index to promote. One thing, we can use the number of the band, or we can use the twist index and the band index. The left example shows the example to use the band number, but you need to be careful because the Einstein finds the band number starting from 0, but in this template, the band number is starting from the 1. So we need to plus 1 to express the promoter electrons from the band number 19 to the 20. And also, if you can use the twist index, band index to define the electron promotions. So you put the 019 and 020. It means that we will promote the electrons at the twist index 0 and the band index 19 to the twist index 0 to the band index 20. So once we just promoted these electrons, and we see the Einstein printed out the Einstein file again, we clearly see that the occupied state and unoccupied state is changed as we defined. So next thing is the quasi-particle gap. How to calculate the quasi-particle? Quasi-particle gap calculation is more simple. Just we need to calculate the ionization potential and electron affinity with adding electrons on the QMCPACK input and removing electrons on the QMCPACK input. We need to do the QMC, this adding and ionization potential and electron affinity is separately, and we will be able to obtain the quasi-particle gap, calculating the energy difference between this electron affinity and ionization potential. So we need to do the three different calculations to the quasi-particle gaps: ground state calculations, and another two things for the removing and adding electron configurations. So here is we need to minimize the finite size effect. So we need to do this quasi-particle and the optical gaps with the different size cell and need to explain it to the bulk limit. Here is the result of the DMC result for the quasi-particle gap and excitonic gaps for the bulk germanium selenide system. So as you see that this excitonic gap result is in excellent agreement in the expandable value, so that you can predict that the QMC can give some very good excited state information for the bulk germanium system as well as the ground state properties. So here is some quick summaries from our bulk germanium selenide studies. DMC can provide the accurate structural and optical properties for the 2D germanium selenide systems simultaneously for the optical properties and the electronic properties. So as I just told, bulk germanium selenide cohesive energy is not experimentally reported yet, but the derivative cohesive energy can give us a good guidance to assess the energetic stability of the bulk germanium selenide-based materials. So we see the excitonic gap is a good agreement with the experimental result. By calculating the difference between the quasi-particle gap and the excitonic gap, we can estimate the exciton binding energies, and it's estimated as a 0.3 electron volt. So we expect the bulk germanium selenide has the weak exciton binding energies. So now we carry out these QMC studies on the monolayer germanium selenide system. So the monolayer germanium selenide is the most attractive alkali metal ion anode materials, and it is known to possess better electrical conductivity than the black phosphorus or the graphene. And it is attracted with the great attention because the previous theoretical studies revealed that the gap can be tuned using the strength. So it telling us that the strength sensitivity clearly shows the importance of obtaining accurate these monolayer geometries. But its detailed geometries, optical properties for monolayers are not experimentally known, because the DFT GGA shows the very huge variation for the relaxed lattice parameters for the monolayer systems. It tells us that it's difficult to obtain the monolayer the chemical structures using the DFT, and also tell that the difficult to assess the accuracy of the reported the DFT band gaps, because it's also varied from the 0.8 to the 1.8 electron volt depending on the structures and the exchange coordination functionals used in the study. So here is the optimized tables for the optimized DFT geometries for the monolayer for using the various exchange coordination functionals, including well-known the PBE scan and the hybrid functionals. Here we clearly see that the relaxed geometry is strongly varied depending on the exchange coordination functional used in the study. So it is hard to confirm which is the optimal geometries for these monolayer systems. So here is some simple studies of the DMT optical gaps with the different DFT geometries for the monolayer structures. We just calculate the same indirect gaps, same direct gaps at the gamma point for the monolayers using the DMCs, but the geometry is different from the which were obtained from the different exchange coordination functionals. We see just with the different geometries, we see the strong difference with the calculated indirect gaps from the DMC. So the accurate benchmark calculations of a monolayer germanium selenide is needed for the geometries to obtain the accurate optical properties for the monolayer systems. So here is the quick DMC calculations on the different atomic coordinate with the different lattice parameters. We see the starting from the geometry for the scan, PB, LDA, PB0, B3, and the HSA. They are well-known exchange coordination functional. We see that the PB0 or the HSA shows the lower DMC energies for some selected lattice parameters. It shows some geometries from these hybrid functionals give some the energetically stable geometries among the DFT functionals. And also the additional the lattice parameters result, and also we show the HSE can provide relatively stable germanium selenide atomic coordinate as compared to the other exchange coordination functions with the minimized DMC energies compared to the other geometries. But also the HSE geometry is a bit tricky to confirm it's the most stable geometries, because this is the energy contour plus from the HSE geometries for the DFT functionals and the DMT functionals. So we see the optimized DMC and DFT geometries are rather different, shows very different minimums in the energy contour plus. So from the data we predict, we should assume that atomic force evaluation is underestimated in the DFT relaxation process, and we need to proceed the more accurate geometry optimization process more than the DFT relaxation process. So how to find the chemical geometries for those germanium and the monolayer? So we use the recently developed surrogate Hertzian-based parallel line search method that enable to accelerate the search for the DMC potential energy surface optimal by incorporating approximate from the DFT energy Hertzians. We use this method, but I just skip the detailed explanations of this method, because the details will be presented in the next sessions with the titled surrogate Hertzian geometry optimization with the stock by the Dr. Jua Tionens, who developed this method. So you can see the details of this method on here. So after this session, if someone interested in the actual workflow for the germanium optimizations, you can tell me and I'll be happy to share. So for the geometry optimizations, we hear the total, the 5 parameters for the optimizations, including lattice parameters A and B, and the angle, the bond length and bond angles for the theta 1, theta 2, and the length L1, L2 included. So we just minimize this parameter to the 5 parameters as the X and the J1, J2. So here is the quick DMC total energy, how the total energies is going. the iterations of the surrogate Hessian method with the total 4 iterations. So we see in the total, the final iterations on the step 3, so we just get some the minimized DMC energies, which is the especially is significantly smaller than the DMC energies in the HSE geometries that tell us that the geometries obtained from the surrogate Hessian is more energetically stable than the DFT released geometries from the HSE. So here is a fully summarized tables for the optimized geometry for the monolayer structures, including DMCs and the PBE. We see that there's a optimized geometries from the surrogate Hessians is a very bit consistent with the experimental for the bulk system that tell us that the geometry change, structural property changes due to the van der Waals interactions bit weaks in the germanium selenide system. So now I just discussed it, how much these optical properties is changed with the different geometries. This figure shows the two band structures obtained from the same PB exchange conversion functionals, but the different geometries from the PBE and the DMCs. In the PB geometries, we see the PB gives them the indirect gaps, but the difference between the direct gap and the indirect gap is very small. And from the DMC geometries, the PB band structures give some bit different result. They show the larger direct gaps and the larger direct gap difference between direct gap and indirect gaps, while the PB geometry shows a very small gap difference in between the indirect and direct gap. And we also found some additional possible direct gap at the gamma point in the DMC geometry, which is significantly smaller with the PB geometry. So we clearly see that the band structure is very sensitive to the structures we obtain. So here we calculate the three different gaps for the two direct gaps at the gamma point, and there's the gamma primes and the one indirect gaps. Unlike the direct gaps, to the calculated indirect gaps, we need to make a strategy to generate the supercell size and the shape, because to calculate the indirect gaps, we need to include the twisters that include the CBM and the VBM for the indirect gap, because they are different unlike the direct gaps. So here's the things how can you make a strategy for to make a shape and the size of the supercells. So this figure shows the post-Brillouin zone of the supercell centered at the gamma point, and the dashed line shows the zone boundaries for the post-Brillouin zones for the primitive cell, which is the gamma point is included. So if we suppose to expand this supercells as a 2x2, and the edge length for this post-Brillouin zone is decreased as shown in the solid lines in the figure B. And this X1 point was in the boundaries in the post-Brillouin zone of the primitive cell. Now it becomes to be located at the inside of the post-Brillouin zone of the supercell as shown in figure 3. Figure 3 shows the periodic transitions of the post-Brillouin zone of the supercell, and we see that the X1 point, which was in the zone boundary in the post-Brillouin zone in the primitive cell, will be appears in the centers of the Brillouin zone, post-Brillouin zone of the supercells via the reciprocal lattice transitions G1. So we be able to see the X1 point and the gamma point together in the center of the Brillouin zone, which is usually called as the band folding. So we can see that this example also in the this QMC calculations and the DFT calculations. If we suppose to get some the gamma point in the 1 by 1 by cell, as we calculate the direct gap direct gap for the bulk system. If we suppose to get some that is the eigenstate informations, we will be able to get only eigenstate at the gamma point. Now we suppose to expand this supercell to 2 by 2 by 1, and we will get the same twist. We will get to the additional k point for the 0.50, 0.5, and the 0.5 and 0.5 k point as shown in this eigenstate information for the 2 by 2 by 1. Those additional k point is corresponding to the x1, r, x2 point in the figure 3. So now we can make a strategy how we make a shape to the supercell to include the CBM and VBM for the indirect gap calculation for the monolayer system. So we need to include the k point for the 0.330 and the 0.033 to estimate the indirect gaps for this calculation. So it means that at least we need to expand to the supercell to 3 by 3 by 1 cells to include all k point to calculate the indirect gap calculations. So here is a strategy to calculate the 3 by 3 by 1 supercells to calculate the 2 direct gaps and 1 indirect gap calculations. For the indirect gap calculation, we clearly see that those CBM and the VBM and the CBM is fully included in the Einstein eigenstate information. So we can promote the electrons from the electrons at from the some 98 band numbers to the 90s band numbers, or we can use twist index 29 and 310. So we can find the corresponding direct gap informations in those eigenstate information together. So here is the optical properties for the monolayer systems with the different size of cells for the 2 different direct gap and 1 indirect gap and 1 quasi-particle gap. And this is the summarized tables for direct and indirect gap for the structures. So from these tables, we clearly see that monolayer has a substantially larger band gaps than the bulk germanium selenide, and that gives us some possibilities for this monolayer system is highly tunable wide band gap semiconductors using the strength. And we see the very small difference between direct gap and the indirect gap. So unfortunately, it was not easy to confirm between the direct and indirect gap for the monolayer structures using the QMCs, but it tells us some possibilities. This indirect gap, direct gaps can be tunable with the strengths, and we just give some expectation to this monolayer germanium selenide has a tunable the indirect gap direct to the indirect gap transitions. Here are the quick summaries for the conclusions. Germanium selenide monolayer exhibit the optical characteristics of the wide gap semiconductor with the tunable band gaps, and we see the very small difference between the direct and indirect gaps tell us that the strong sensitivity of the sensitivity of the gaps with the strengths and get some the accurate geometry is important to obtain the accurate optical properties. I just put some of these examples to calculate the gaps on the germanium selenide on the GitHub repos for our workshop. As I told, this is not for the science production because I reduced the k-point grid and the energy cutoff to run in the virtual machines, but it is enough to understand how you can calculate the optical and quasi-particle gap for the given structures. So I just taught only for the excited state for the equational state for the 2D systems, but there's much things you need to consider for the 2D systems. So for the final size analysis or the calculated binding energies for the some multi-layer systems that will be explained Dr. Karen Saitas for the next sessions for some more further analysis of the 2D structures workflow. So this is what I just prepared for these sessions. I'll be happy to answer if you have some questions on there.
Thanks very much, Hyunduk. I think you packed the whole physical review materials paper into that presentation. There are actually a few questions, and I think we need to be a little bit careful about time here. One thing I will note actually is that the PRM does, in the 2021 physical review materials, does include all the inputs and outputs used for those calculations archived on the materials data facility, and the link is there. So for full reproducibility. So there are some questions about the timings actually, or the cost of these calculations, which I'll ask now. So Nastasia commented, this is very interesting work, but also clearly a lot of work. What could realistically be done on a typical university-sized cluster? The calculations seem large and not easy to manage from a computational point of view. Am I right? Question mark. So how costly are the different parts, right? I was thinking that some parts are quite cheap at the beginning, and then you got more sophisticated as time went on.
Yes, I just disregarding to bulk, I just believe that some calculation is a monolayer systems enough to deal with the university's resource, because I also have some experience on doing the monolayer calculations. So some allotropes of graphenes with the university resource. Bulk is a bit tricky to estimate the bulk system with the university resource, because it requires much of the electrons in the primitive cell already, but there's a small size of the cell, small size of the problems you can deal with the monolayer. I believe the monolayer will be possible to deal with, get some the cohesive energies or the band gap calculations.
Thanks. And one thing just occurred to me as you're saying that, Hyunduk, was that you have the link, the reference to a paper by Daniel Wines on gallium selenide, and possibly that entire paper was done on a university cluster. So that's one place one can look to gauge the costs.
Yes, it's a good point.
So we have a number of questions on geometry optimization and the surrogate Hessian approach. And I'll note that's actually going to be covered in the next session. So we'll hold questions on that. And then I'm going to generalize a couple of questions that have turned up about excitations, and we can go into more details on the Slack. But how are the nodes of the wave functions defined when you're doing a excited state calculation, Hyunduk?
It's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky question, because we need to take care of the optimizing this nodal surface in the ground state, excited state properties separately. So even if there is we get some optimized nodal surface for the wave functions in the ground state, it doesn't guarantee it was fitted onto the excited state calculation. So we need to careful to treat if the wave function is well optimized for the excited state.
All right, thanks, Hyunduk. Yeah, we do have quite an extensive tutorial on excited states that was actually written by our next speaker. So if that's of interest, we can put a link to that in the Slack or follow up to provide more details. As there is some fundamental theory there about for which states does one have a variational principle, for example. And then, as Hyunduk explained, there are some important practical matters to make sure one is making the excitation one is hoping to in these calculations.